stacking tools on top of tools is usually creating inefficiencies. It reminds me when you were saying that about how the government keeps throwing money at problems and causing more problems.
In this insightful episode, we dive into the world of pain points in business, exploring how identifying and effectively addressing these challenges can be a game changer for any company. Learn how solving pain points not only improves customer satisfaction, but also drives innovation and business growth.
The Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast is your ultimate launchpad for igniting ideas and skyrocketing your entrepreneurial dreams. Your two hosts will be Professor Gary Palin and serial entrepreneur Ryan Budden.
Good morning, Professor Palin. How are you?
Good morning. How are you doing?
Brilliantly as always.
I understand you're dealing with some snow.
Yeah, we're in Wyoming, my wife and I. We are currently getting snowed in, so it's a cool opportunity to be on a podcast.
All right. So after the podcast, you'll be out doing some shoveling.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Make sure we don't literally get stuck.
For sure.
Yeah, we'll have a lot of fun in the snow, though. Her parents are coming into town as well, so we're probably build a snowman, really enjoy the winter season here.
It sounds like good enjoyment.
Before we get to snowman, you and I have gotten together to discuss pain points. The reason we're doing this podcast is we both like coming back to the concept of a pain point, what's irritating, agitating, and using that as an opportunity recognition tool.
Absolutely. And I always look at pain points simply as a problem of prospective customers, or as we were talking before, sometimes internally within your companies that you can resolve issues.
That's exactly right. Where are you finding friction, or where can you see large groups of people finding friction, and how can you solve that problem? I think that we've broken it up right externally and internally, so we can run through both of those scenarios.
I look at pain points too as some type of discomfort or inconvenience. Inefficiencies are very often one of the big issues that people look at when they're identifying an opportunity as a pain point. Sometimes financial burdens can be an issue for a pain point that can be resolved. Basically, it's an overview of obstacles that prevent you from achieving your goals.
Externally, that can look like an unsolved problem, something that a large group of people are all annoyed by. And how can you create a company or a product, if you have an existing company or service, to go and solve that in the market?
The work we've been doing with the Janus Entrepreneurial Assessment is a pain point issue. Many companies have told me they want to hire entrepreneurial-minded individuals. The pain point was they had no means of identifying who was entrepreneurial thinking. And therefore, from that, the Janus Entrepreneurial Assessment was created to evaluate the tendencies that they can be used in hiring decisions and also informing teams within the company.
And then we're working on expanding that into culturally. So are you fostering not only individual entrepreneurs, but a culture of entrepreneurship as well? Again, that's directly from a pain point in the companies that we've directly worked with and companies that we've gotten feedback from that are using the Janus Entrepreneurial Assessment.
That's spot on.
A big one, and you used to do this exercise in your class, I remember, is a great exercise when you're stuck or needing to think through a problem, is just take 10 minutes and start writing a list of things that are pain points in your life and the life of people around you. I remember really a silly example was somebody in the class, and this is really silly, that's why I'm bringing it up, because I don't think it's a viable business, but it was, they were needing to watch the news in the morning to get their update because their job was related, but they also needed to take a shower. So it was a waterproof screen. They could be in the shower. Silly, but that could be a realistic pain point for somebody.
I've had several businesses launch from that one exercise. What the exercise is, I would put 3 or 4 students together and I'd ask them to write a list of 10 things that irritate them. And inevitably, Professor Palin was on that list of number 10. From that 10, I would say, identify 2 of the 10 where you can resolve the pain point, where you can come up with a solution to that. And then they would talk about the resolution. Then I would say, look at it and say, how many people have the pain point? What's the size of the market towards that? Is it a viable solution that you can bring to the table? And then how can you monetize that? And I would say, pick one of the 2 that you feel you can bring that to fruition. Inevitably, I would have a class with 1 or 2 viable business concepts. Now, it doesn't mean it's a viable business concepts, but it's potentially viable and it's worth looking into. It's really amazing. I would do that within an hour.
anyone listening to our podcast can do that as well if they're trying to seek an opportunity to start a new business. If this is something they know they want to do, but they don't quite have that idea right now.
Just write down 10 things that irritate the heck out of you. And hopefully not many of them will be the Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast will be one of the 10.
We're honored to be mentioned if it is. I also use a very similar exercise to this internally for businesses. So through my consultancy, a lot of times what I find is that there are so many tools out there that when businesses start to falter, not necessarily fail, but things aren't working really well, the tendency is to just put another tool and another tool and another tool in place. What I find is that stacking 50 tools on top of each other doesn't lead to great results. What I'll start with is what's not working. Let's make a big list, brainstorm, nothing's wrong, of things that aren't currently working. And then you can point out the biggest problems and also the ones that are going to create the biggest impact if we stop everything and solve those couple things immediately. And oftentimes that will shift the focus on what can we change instead of what can we add.
Stacking tools on top of tools is usually creating inefficiencies. It reminds me when you were saying that about how the government keeps throwing money at problems and causing more problems.
Yeah, you see that same problem in business though. What's another thing we can pay for to make this go away? Instead of what do we actually have to look at and shift or change to solve that problem?
And that results in the tools for running the business versus using the tools as a means to help you drive the business.
I'm the biggest fan of AI there is. It's changing the way people do it. But I think this is becoming an issue. People are viewing AI as the business, the core of the business, and it needs to stay with the people. Whether it's ChatGPT or any of these other AI bots that are extremely useful in business, the individuals still need to be the core. They have their limitations.
I still view AI as a tool, not the solution.
Unfortunately, with how much hype there is around AI, people are really viewing it as the solution.
Yeah, it's not the first time I've seen this either. So that when the internet first came about, everyone was jumping and thinking there's a new way of doing business. The e-commerce platform was the only solution. And companies started to change their names and adding .com to the actual name of the company. Then they had to change it back from the .com to the real business.
It's like when phone books were the big thing. Companies that do AAA or ABC or 10A or something before their name so that they were first in the phone book.
I had a friend right when, ironically, internet first came into play and the .com burst was going about. He chose the name of his company based on a bird that began with the letter A because he had to go to trade shows and he wanted to be first in the list of the companies on the trade show.
Adapting with the times, that could be a pain point now, right? We're starting to understand how things are categorized differently. If you're trying to get ahead on SEO, it's no longer the 3 A's in front of your name or the .com after it. But what is it? And can you be the one to help address that?
Productivity can be a pain point that we address. And you alluded to that with the tools. But one we really haven't talked about is the pain point of customer service, because that's one that I would suggest that companies focus on their customer service. And is it a pain point for their customers? And this is an existing business. Or can you come up with a solution for the pain point with multiple core customer service experiences and deliver some type of result? Could be an app, it could be some type of measurement tool to mitigate that pain point. Also technological, because it's changing so rapidly. Are there pain points caused from technology? Or can you use technology to address pain points? You've heard me talk about the business that I created where my dog broke the invisible fence and we couldn't find Spirit. At that point, to track lost dogs, it was a chip that was embedded in their neck. And it was better than nothing, but it was very inefficient. But technology with GPS and geofence tracking allowed us to come up with a means of putting a collar on the dog and tracking them real time using that geofence and the GPS technology. Technology created the opportunity to address a pain point that 10 years before we couldn't have done.
It's a great articulation of a pain point that turned into a business.
Ryan, before we continue, I'd like to address an important issue for the Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast. Creating a quality podcast with valuable content is very time consuming and has substantial costs to create and produce. To cover these costs, Many podcasts use a paid subscription model. Others use a sponsorship model. We prefer not to implement either of these options. I would like to address a concept called value for value podcasting.
While we enjoy creating value for our listeners, providing insights that enhance their entrepreneurial success, it would mean the world to us if our audience would also give some value back to us to support our efforts.
One might wonder, how can you support our show? Well, it's simple. Sharing our podcast with friends, colleagues, or on your social media is a fantastic way to give back.
Also, we love receiving your feedback, comments, or even just a cheerful email.
Or consider making a monetary contribution through platforms such as Venmo or Substack.
You can also support us by setting up a bill payment through your bank. This method allows you to send a contribution directly to our physical address.
Every bit of support counts, whether it's tuning in, sharing our episodes, or contributing financially. Each contribution helps us cover production costs and improve the podcast.
Check out our website at prospirit.com, where you can find more details on how to support us. Every contribution, no matter the size, makes a massive difference. Decide for yourself, what is the value of this episode to you? Let's do this together. We provide value and you return value. Value for value podcasting.
Thank you for being a part of Let's Get Entrepreneurial. Now, let's get back to today's episode.
I also like to look at how do you identify pain points. And I look at three basic ways that I'll do this. One is customer feedback. We're always talking about talk to the customer. They will tell you.
Customers' feedback is absolutely vitally important.
And very often people will look at the customer's feedback as they're complaining. And that's a mistake. Listen to them. What is their feedback? Why do they have a problem? And there's always some component, not every customer, but if you listen to 10 customers, if you see commonality, there's a pain point ability to address. Also, more formal surveys are a way to identify. One that you're into big time is data analytics. You have all of this data coming into you, and most companies are just sitting there not utilizing it.
Or not even collecting it, right?
So you can utilize that for innovative solutions that you can explore. How do we implement to address major pain points that people are facing?
Every business, no matter what size or what stage of development, from super mature to an idea, can benefit out of that exercise.
A simple example, and most people want to address this or think of this as a pain point, was in the late 2000s, Domino's Pizza. And you would think of, well, what pain point could they possibly be addressing with pizza? They were facing at that time significant criticism regarding the taste and quality of the pizza. That was the pain point that the customers were telling them. The product wasn't that good. Their solution was they launched a very bold advertising campaign that acknowledged the concerns of the pizza quality. They then revamped the pizza recipe, improving the ingredients, but then they introduced a transparent tracking system for delivery. And that's where you started to see the advent of Domino's was one of the pioneers. Addressing and listening to the pain point led to that solution. And the outcome was that their sales went up, their stock price went up, and their market share surged.
Another really great case study I like to think of is Spotify. So Spotify was, to my knowledge, the first giant to move into streaming. So before that, you were either paying for an individual album or an individual song. But people wanted to listen to new music or to explore music types. And there wasn't really the ability to do that other than listening to the radio and having somebody else dictate what was next and that after that. Spotify created subscription-based streaming where you could create your own playlists. And that's what we're all very much used to these days.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, also, Spotify addressed another pain point from unknown artists that weren't able to get published.
There we go.
And there was a platform for them. So there was both sides of the equation and allowing them to meet in the middle. And some unknowns became very, very popular. I believe Justin Bieber, that was one of the components that led to his success. I think it might have been YouTube that he was recognized with.
YouTube was where he was first recognized, I believe.
There's pain points on both sides of the equation. It's just interesting applications.
It's a fantastic exercise. You know, a lot of the things that we talk about on this podcast are those sorts of tools. And this is a really great exercise that you can do pretty frequently and come up with great results.
In conclusion, I would just say write down 10 things that irritate the heck out of you. Pick 2. Analyze how many people have that pain point. Is it large enough to sustain a business concept? Can you come up with a viable solution? And how do you monetize it? And start there. Then do the business model canvas and the analysis, et cetera, driving the business. Now, the answer might be, this is not viable. but it's a great place to start.
And it's a great mental exercise. Both you and I don't struggle for ideas. I do this exercise quite often in my head. It's a fun one. I can't tell you how many Excel spreadsheets I have working out the minutiae of a business that I'm never going to do because it's a mental exercise.
If anyone's listening to us that hasn't subscribed to our podcast, we encourage you to do so.
Yes, please. It's what keeps us alive and keeps us motivated.
Let's get entrepreneurial.
Let's get entrepreneurial.
We extend our gratitude for your presence and attention. Check out profspirit.com to discover resources and courses designed specifically for innovators like you. Stay on the cutting edge by following us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and other platforms as it is released. Until then, keep the entrepreneurial flame burning.